There was this wonderful bit of footage. I was called quite late to speak in the debate. And the way the cameras work, they're a little bit more liberal than in the main chamber in the Westminster Hall area. And as I watched it back later that evening, just to check I'd said the right things, I noticed the camera had picked up that while I was speaking, Chris Packham was literally sat in the gallery with his head...
Yes! Magnificent.
...in his hands, which gave me a bit of delight. And then he went off to sulk for a few days, because it was actually the most preposterous debate. That while Justice and League Against Cruel Sports and everyone thought that they were going to have this massive barnstorming victory in the chamber where those of us that stand up for rural pursuits and shooting and grouse shooting in particular for that one, we're going to get our backsides handed to us on a plate. And the reality was that they only got one speaker, a usual suspect, to even remotely go there on the agenda they wanted. So they went away pretty beaten up and pretty downhearted. And then about a week later, when the tears had dried up, Packham decides to pick on me and Rishi on social media. And I was doing cartwheels. It was the weekend of the British Grand Prix. I was at Silverstone. I mean, cartwheels along the side of the track. Not literally. I'd finally done it. Life goal achieved. Triggered Chris Packham.
Well done, well done. Well, I've been there. It's just a very warm feeling you get. It really is. Yeah. No, it was a fabulous speech to watch. How does something like that come about? Because I was saying this to Robbie earlier on, one of the things that's noticeable about it is you all said slightly different things, and you got a Labour guy on your side as well, who used to be an animal rights activist. So it was a pretty remarkable piece of work. How does that come about? It can't just be accident.
To many respects, it was. So actually, organisations like BASC and the Countryside Alliance do work in the background to ensure that all MPs, not just the ones that, like me, that give them money every month to be a member, get the right briefings and the right facts on these things, so that if they want to speak in debates, they go in well briefed. But I walked into that chamber not really knowing what to expect. It's a new parliament. We don't know all of the new Labour MPs or all the Lib Dem MPs that well yet. We don't know where they stand, particularly on the rural agenda, particularly on rural pursuits. So there was a risk that we walked in there to an ambush. And when I walked in there and the first person I saw was Rishi Sunak, I thought, okay, this could go quite well. It's very rare that a former Prime Minister turns up in the secondary debating chamber. And of course, he takes grouse shooting very seriously. It's big in his constituency, and it was great that he was there. And I looked across to the Labour side, and there was virtually no one sat there, other than this guy from Bishop Auckland, who actually I don't think I'd met before. And then imagine the delight on particularly our side of the House when he spoke, until he got onto hunting at the end. He spoke such sense.
Yeah.
And it was actually reassuring. And then when poor old Olivia Blake, who's a bit of a broken record on this, stood up to speak, I think even she realised she was beaten.
Yeah.
And the mood on the gallery from Chris Packham's lot showed it.
Yeah, it was like watching the Grand National from our point of view. I don't know how many of you were glued to Parliament TV that day, not my natural channel, but I absolutely loved it.
If you're having trouble sleeping, put it on. It will sort everything out.
No, I did. You had one moment where I was shouting at the television. Okay, so they threw a question. You said about the amount of hen harrier chicks that are fledged as a result of grouse shooting, which is a great story, and we tell it over again. And they chucked you but how many of them make it to adulthood? And you answered that question, but I was going, 75% of them die anyway. Just say it, Greg. Say it.
Fair enough.
How are you supposed to know? Come on.
Fair enough. Look, sometimes when you get that dreadful moment, and it's worse in the main chamber on the green leather benches.
Didn't show.
When you get that intervention and you think you know where it's going to go, and you have what you're going to say lined up in the back of your mind, and then they say something completely different. And sometimes, believe it or not, I know it's not popular belief, politicians are human.
Really?
Sometimes we sit back and, you're so focused on where you wanted to go in your debate, you do get a bit flustered, and maybe I could have answered that.
No, you were fine. I mean, the point was they couldn't intervene again. I mean, you answered it. No, it was an absolute joy to watch. Buckingham is not a noted grouse shooting area. How did you manage to? Because the deputy speaker was very keen to say that everybody in that debate had to have a reason to speak.
Okay, so actually it's not quite as strict as that. She picked particularly on Kevin Hollenrake because Kevin is a member of the Shadow Cabinet, and the rules are that members of the Shadow Cabinet are not meant to speak from the back benches unless it's on something directly impactful on their constituency, whereas just as a lowly Shadow Junior Minister, I've got a little bit more freedom. And yeah, you're right, Buckinghamshire does not have grouse moors, that is true, but I've always felt the need to go in there and back all the debates that are pro-shooting, pro-rural pursuits, pro the conservation work that shooting communities do. Because if you just let it go and say, oh, well, there aren't any grouse moors in my patch, well, you're letting down the rest of the team, the rest of the cause. And that's why it was important for me to go in there and do that. And actually, a point I made in that debate is, yeah, lots of my constituents do travel to shoot grouse, and that's good for businesses in my constituency. Actually, they're here showing today. Go and pay them a visit, because it's pretty sad at the moment. The Oxford Gun Company, which despite its name is actually in Buckinghamshire, in the mid-Buckinghamshire constituency, is in the village of Oakley, and they're an incredible gun shop, an incredible supplier of shooting equipment. And that's good for their business if Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire residents are going in to buy their cartridges, buy their guns, buy their clothing, etc., in order to go and shoot on grouse moors. And actually, while we're on that subject, I went to see David earlier on the stall to wish him well. Obviously, he's in a pretty low place after
parents, yes.
the death of particularly Doug, his dad, who was a real shining light in the shooting industry a couple of months ago. And so if people can go and support the Oxford Gun Company, do so.
Now, Shirley and Doug Florent, who ran the Oxford Gun Company for years and years, died within 3 days of each other. It was extraordinary.
It was horrible, yeah.
And bless you for going to their funeral. Well done. It seems peculiar when there are a lot of MPs, especially in the southeast of England, who think that shooting is a demerit activity, and if they talk about it, they will lose votes. And you are the opposite of that. I mean, how did you come to that conclusion when so many, I mean, they're not necessarily the same political colour as you, but so many don't think that?
I like to think I want to do the right thing. I know, someone who shoots myself, the value of it to the economy, to conservation, to the tasty, tasty meat that we get from it. But I don't think it is a demerit to talk about it from my constituency perspective. My constituency is 336 square miles of rural Buckinghamshire. My largest town is Prince's Risborough, just over 8,000 population. So that paints a picture of what mid-Buckinghamshire looks like. And we have plenty of shoots. We have several playgrounds. We have lots of game shoots that happen in the Buckinghamshire countryside. And when I go on a shoot at home, and I get chatting to the beaters, and you get chatting to the other guns and the keepers, you realise just how important it is to all of them, who are my constituents and who are lifeblood of those rural communities. And then you go to the pubs where the shoot lunches take place and the whole wider economy that shooting supports. Yeah, you'll get one or two aunties that will have a go at me for it, and I will stand my ground and give the reasons, just like I'm giving you right now, why shooting is important to Buckinghamshire.
You've got a hill to climb with this government. They don't seem to think shooting is very important, or perhaps it should be banned. They are down on farmers. They are bringing in the family farm tax. It's so difficult being in opposition because you're not going to have an effect through votes. What can you do in Parliament to push back against this way of thinking in government?
It's always about making a lot of noise, but not just noise for noise's sake, but noise with the facts, with the realities, with the harsh realities of what this government are doing, particularly to farming. 90% of the land mass of my constituency is agricultural land. And when I visit those small family farms, I took Kemi to one in a village called Long Crendon, right on the edge of Buckinghamshire, by the Oxfordshire border, just after the family farm tax was first unveiled. Upper Peppers Mill Farm. And the Seed family, good name for farmers, the Seed family, explained to me how they've done the maths. If they have to sell land to pay an inheritance tax bill that could come within the next few years, they're looking at selling nearly a third of the farm to meet that. A third. It's a 500-acre arable farm. sell a third of it, it's not viable.
It's not going to be viable.
Not viable at all. Or if they borrow the money, with current presumptions on BPS and SFI and so on current presumptions, it would take them 40 years to pay that debt back. By which point, the law of averages, I don't want to wish ill upon anyone, but you may well have incurred a second lot of the tax.
Yeah.
And I just don't think the government fully understand the realities of farming on the ground. These are decisions made in London and Birmingham and Manchester and Leeds that are totally divorced from the realities of the countryside, the realities of farming. Perhaps it'd do them good if they'd just watch a couple of seasons of Clarkson's Farm. They might get a little bit of an insight into the realities of farming, but at the moment they just don't. But we have forced them into some big U-turns in other policy areas. They've U-turned on the winter fuel allowance. They've U-turned, possibly wrongly, but they've U-turned on the welfare reforms they were pushing through. If we keep up this noise, if we keep pushing reality down their throats, then maybe we might just get lucky and get a reversal of the family farm tax.
So I've got Daniel Zeichner, DEFRA Minister, here tomorrow. What should I be asking him? I mean, he's a pretty remarkable MP in a way, because he's one of the only ones I've ever seen come to a game fair, and so that's to his credit. But so I don't want to scare him away. But what's going to make him uncomfortable? Or is he big enough to cope with me? Do you think?
I think it's putting those real life case studies to him. Let's be fair for a moment. When we were in government in the last Parliament, I remember seeing him at the game fair, at county shows. He came to the Buckinghamshire show a couple of times. Yeah, even turning up at things like GWCT dinners. You look around and, blimey, you're here. And actually credit to him for doing that, for trying to learn the brief. But then what he's doing in government, now he's got that title, farming minister, now he's sitting there in DEFRA, okay, on the Treasury's instructions, is totally opposite to what he will have learned at this very show, at county shows up and down the land, at all those dinners that he went to. And I think putting back to him those real-life case studies, like the Long-Crendon example I just gave, the real impact on real people, real farmers struggling. Look at the crop. I don't know whether anyone else drove in and went to the car park that was on the interminably long farm track that got to the car park this morning. The crop does not look very well this year. No. Yields are going to be very, very low across the piece. My wife's family farm out in Suffolk, and our yield, we've got the oats in and some of the spring barley. The yields are down, and that is going to be a picture across the whole country. So at a time when farmers are once again struggling, largely as a result of the weather, now is not the time to be kicking them. And I think, if anyone, Daniel can get that, and it's what he then does within government that will matter.
That's crucial. Look, I just want to round up on one thing. 12th September, you've got the trophy imports bill coming back. I put those two there because they're from the same animal. Okay. So don't usually get a two-headed antelope. No. One of those is real, the other one is a replica. Now, they're going to ban me from bringing one of them in. They're not going to ban me from bringing the other one in. Can't they see the illogicality of that ban?
I think it's very ideological for them on this front. And I think it's actually one of the danger zones that we're in. A bit like the original hunting ban, where the then government of the day, and Tony Blair has since actually spoken of his regret of the original hunting ban, they find themselves in such deep water on their domestic agenda, on these huge rebellions that they're already seeing only a year into government on welfare and on two-child benefit cap and on all of these things. And it's almost a muscle memory reaction for them to throw what they call red meat at their left-wing backbenchers. And I'm afraid, and this is where we've really got to be vigilant, where we've really got to be on our toes, is that they'll look to things like trophy hunting imports, they will look to shooting, they will look to speeding up their promise to ban trail hunting, which is the most nuts promise even this government's ever made, to ban a practice where nothing even dies. And they will throw that in as their so-called red meat. And we've got to be really vigilant against that. Do they see the logic? No, they don't. And it's one of those arguments that we've got to work even harder to make, because it's also so remote to most people's constituencies, to get them engaged to understand it.
Well, look, keep doing it.